Hey everybody, this is part 2 of the unnamed fairy tale that I cannot tell you because it would spoil the surprise. But I bet you've already figured it out. So yeah, here it is. A year had passed and the household was almost unrecognizable with how much had changed. The pall of despair and desperation that had previously hung over the family that lived inside had lifted. It had been on such a fortunate day when the messenger arrived with news of the prince's ball and an invitation. The house was in a flurry of activity as everyone made preparations to attend. The prince was looking to find a wife. Ellie had not felt so excited since the curse had been placed upon her. She thought it would plague her until the day that she died, but the cool medallion that hung around her neck had stopped the curse from enacting its horrible price. The idea of attending a ball had been something that Ellie had given up on. Now she felt like a normal girl. She left her room and went across the hallway to her stepsister's room. Kayla and Jocelyn were inside, helping each other get it ready, and Ellie joined them. It was like they were children again, laughing and playing together as they got ready for the ball. As evening fell, their carriage was made ready, and the three sisters and their mother got inside. The carriage trundled through the lanes towards the palace. The manor was not far from the palace, and before long they arrived at the entrance to the courtyard. They were escorted inside to the ball, and Ellie couldn't help but feel a sense of wonderment. Before her encounter with the gypsies, she had dreamed of a moment like this. The gypsies had destroyed all hint of those dreams, and now here she was. Her heart was aflutter, and she couldn't help but gossiping and giggling with her stepsisters. The night was a joy, and she couldn't help smiling. She mostly sat with her stepmother and her stepsisters. She'd resigned herself to her fate of her curse, and she still felt reserved amongst all the other guests. She didn't mind, though. This was an experience, and she was here to enjoy it. She even got to meet the prince. Just a year ago, she had never thought that such a thing would happen, as she was locked in a basement every night. The ball was almost over when Ellie started to feel ill. She stood out on one of the balconies looking towards the dark cityscape below. A pain started in her chest, and it was accompanied by the taste of bile rising in her throat. She placed her hand on her chest, but something felt wrong. Her eyes widened in panic as her hand traced around her neck. Her medallion was gone. She ran back inside the ballroom looking for her stepmother. "What's the matter, dear?" her stepmother asked, worried, seeing Ellie in such a panic. "The medallion! It's missing!" Ellie's eyes were wide in fright, and she was gasping for air, trying to calm herself. She groaned. I don't feel well." Her mother gasped in fright. "We'll leave at once." It must have looked quite strange to the onlookers as Ellie and her family rushed from the ballroom all at once, without any warning. Just the chiming of the clock tower chasing them out. Bong, bong, bong. By the time they reached home, Ellie was in near unbearable agony. It felt like her body was being ripped apart. She clung weakly to her stepmother, and they rushed down into the basement. Ellie collapsed onto the floor of the cage. Her stepmother closed and locked the door. As Ellie screamed in pain, her stepmother collapsed on the floor and cried. They sent a message to the palace, but there was no sign or word of the medallion Ellie had worn. Her stepmother sent for the priest again, but he had also seemed to have disappeared without a trace. The brief respite from the pall of gloom that hung over the manor house had reappeared, and the sense of despair reigned complete. Ellie had now given up all hope. The only reason she did not simply die was because of the love and care that her family gave her. It was one afternoon when there was a sudden knocking on the door. They rarely received visitors, and even more rarely entertained guests. Ellie had gone down to the basement. The change had started coming earlier since the medallion had been lost, and her stepmother was just coming back up the stairs. The knocking surprised her, and when she opened the door, she was even more surprised to find the prince standing in the doorway. "Your Highness," she said, flustered, and bowed. "Lady Duchess," he said, bowing in return, "I'm sorry to call on you unannounced, but I could not help myself. I was passing by, and I wished to come visit your daughter, Cinderella." Her heart pounded in her chest, a sudden feeling of dread coming over her. I'm "I'm sorry, Your Highness. She's gone to the countryside for a few days." She stammered slightly, trying to compose herself, but maybe this was news about the medallion. "Oh, that's quite unfortunate. It was my own fault for coming unannounced." "Is this about her medallion?" she asked, daring to hope. "Oh, no," he said, but took a necklace out of his pocket instead. "I just wanted to give her this, and to see her. She's quite an enchanting girl." "I'm sorry, Highness, that she's not in. I will send for her to return at once." "It's quite all right. I will—" The prince stopped mid-sentence. "Do you hear that?" he asked, and stepped into the house. "Hear what?" Stepmother asked, trying to sound calm, but she was beginning to panic. She could hear the noises too. Ellie's transformations had also become more painful with the loss of the medallion. "I'm certain I hear something," the prince said, cocking his head and pushing past Ellie's stepmother. "Oh, it's just this old house creaking," she said, trying to play off the noise as nothing serious. But then Ellie screamed. The prince barged down the stairs into the basement, drawn by the noise. In the dim light coming down the stairway, he could make out the bars of the cage, and someone inside. Ellie's stepmother ran down the stairs behind the prince. "What is this?" the prince demanded. Nothing," she stammered, panicked. "It's for her own good." "Where's the key?" he asked, his eyes scanning the room. The key hung just on the wall beside the stairs, and he spotted it. Grabbing it off the wall, he unlocked the cage and went in. "No, don't!" Ellie's stepmother screamed. The prince crouched down beside Ellie and looked at her. "Cinderella!" He turned towards her stepmother. "Explain yourself!" She could not utter a word, collapsing to her knees and sobbing uncontrollably. A snarling came from behind the prince, and he turned to see the muzzle of a wolf. He yelled out in surprise. Then all there was blood.